This thing all things devours, birds, beasts, trees, flowers, gnaws iron, bites steel, grinds hard stones to meal, slays king, ruins town, and beats high mountain down. That is, of course, a reference to The Hobbit, a riddle that Gollum gave to Bilbo. But let's not get too deep into that, because this is just the introduction to the topic that you clicked to listen to. So, as has been thematically established by my last couple of videos, back in BMT, back when I was in BMT, the boys thought I was kind of clever. Anyway, back in BMT, there was one Sunday where some of us guys were in the break room, in the day room of the dorm, and we were just messing around, and somebody brought up the little thought experiment, the little prompt that is the video title: would you rather die tomorrow or live forever? And that sparked a little discussion. Now, there is a typical answer that everyone was thinking of when they think through this prompt. They think about, oh man, what would that psychologically do to you to, live forever, man? Like, you gotta watch everyone you know love and die, and then you reform attachments, and then every one of those people you know and love dies, and then you do it again, and it's over and over, and eventually you would get to the state that you see in a lot of, anime protagonists or something that live forever, or in extremist fantasy and sci-fi stuff where you have an immortal character where they just don't care about humans and they get calloused to death, and they're just this kind of disgusting person to be around because they've got a diminished sense of humanity. That's the typical answer people were giving, and it's true, and it's also cliche. And although it's true, and it's an interesting thing to think about as far as this prompt goes, it barely scratches the surface. And the people who do talk about it are also, even consciously, they are only scratching the surface of what that kind of emotional and psychological pain would be like. They're not actually thinking it through. They're thinking of a cool way to phrase an idea that they've seen play out in media. Anyway, I want to tie this into something that happened in BMT a couple days before that, where there's a guy who is agnostic, who would every once in a while come up to ask me certain little theological conundrums he was coming up with, and so he asked me. He started probing me, needling me about death. He wasn't aggressive or very hostile, but he wanted to press me on essentially the problem of evil. But he started talking about oh man, I just don't get why God allows death. I think death is so evil. I hate death so much because it's this evil thing, and I've lost people, and I know I'm going to lose more, and I know I'm eventually going to die. Death is just this unfathomable evil. And I countered him by saying, no, essentially, death is actually a mercy. Because although he was agnostic, he was kind of agnostic with Christian foundations. So he used to be Christian, slipped into agnosticism. So he still had a Christian framework for things. Anyway, interesting guy. We were very cordial, and I was very happy to work him through some stuff he was struggling with. So I talked about, well, think about it this way. What would this world look like without death? Given that Adam and Eve did in fact sin and brought sin and pain and suffering into this world. What would this world really be without death to end that? What you have is evil people who just keep getting worse and worse and worse over time. And there's no way to stop them, really. They can also not only inflict evil, they're not bound by time, really, anymore. It's not just temporary evil they can inflict. They can inflict eternal evil, and I'll walk you through kind of what that's like. So, yeah, death essentially bounds pain. So, death in a fallen world, you could almost think of as a good thing. Now, that's not typically the language the Bible uses when talking about death, but that's because death is associated, death is the consequence of sin, and so they go hand in hand. Now, if you try to divorce them, and you say, okay, we could, if you wanted to say, let's have a sinful world but without death, that's even worse than having the sinful world with death, because death bounds sin, bounds pain, bounds suffering to time. It makes it so it can only ever be temporary. So thank God for death, because we live in a sinful world. So I think people really aren't thinking this through. And so I'm going to get into eternal evil and go back to the prompt, which is, what would it actually be like to live forever? Well, yeah, you are going to become desensitized to the joys of the world after a while. But that's not even the worst thing. Let's say you're driving along. You're seeing the world. You're excited. You're maybe not excited anymore because you've seen mountains, or you've been through these mountains before. But let's say you're going through this stretch of mountains again for however manyth time, looking at where it would fall on your timeline. And you're going through these mountains, and freaking engineers didn't design the road very well, or freak accident. There's a landslide, and rocks just come slamming onto the highway, knock you and your car off the side of the road down a cliff, and then boom, you get buried in just thousands of tons of stone, crushed. You know, your body is flattened, your skull is just turned into a paste. You're crushed there because the prompt is not you're immune to pain or you're invincible. It's just you can't die. There will always be some sort of consciousness that is you tied to your body. So you get crushed, you flatten, and your lungs are exploded. You can't scream for help. You can't do anything. You're absolutely pinned. You're absolutely trapped. You're stuck, just mashed. And you stay that way. You're laying there for minutes, just in dust, in stone, the grit of the rocks grinding into your pasted flesh, and your blood dries, and you're there for hours and days and months and years and decades and centuries and millennia, and you're still there under that pile of rocks. That's your immortality. That's what it brings you. Isn't it an eternity there? No, you would only be lucky if you spent an eternity trapped under that pile of rocks, because you're alive for actual ever, not for a bounded idea of forever, not for our projection of time, a human projection of time, actual forever. So the earth gets pulled into the sun, and that's where you get to spend the next few million years, inside the sun, trapped at the center of it. Somehow, I don't know how you have any sort of body to be attached to. but your consciousness is in something just trapped, crushed in the center of the sun, all stuck in a nuclear explosion until eventually, after millions of years, the sun dies. And you're just there in empty space, a frozen thing, alone. You probably, at that point, your waking time on Earth, your time that you lived as a human is nothing. It's like Romans 8:18, where Paul says, "For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us." He's saying, looking at eternity in heaven, your time of darkness here on earth, where you have to deal with death and pain and sin and suffering, is a blip. It's a nothing. It's a crack between two tectonic plates. It basically has no existence, because it's this proportionally incomprehensibly small thing, an atom of existence. It's a nothing. Well, this is the exact opposite. This is all, rather than the suffering and stuff dying off and being replaced by an unfathomable joy for years and years, ad infinitum, into eternity, what you have is your human experience, your life lived as a human, being able to move and walk and think and breathe and inhabit a body as a human is a blip. And what you're looking at is that the joys and the glory of this present time as a human are not worthy to be compared with the eternity of your life, because even all that time living in the sun or under rubble or just in empty space with the stars is nothing compared to the eternity after all that, after the death of the universe, that you just spend. You'll be there. You'll just be there. You'll be. How? I don't know. But you're there in space. Or, who knows, space and time decay, if entropy affects them too. But entropy will affect everything else. The stars, you won't even be able to console yourself with looking at stars, or hoping that, maybe after a few million years, the pain of being out alone in space could be replaced by you getting sucked into the gravity well of a black hole and experiencing that kind of pain for however long. No, you have nothing, because eventually the energy of the universe will just kind of disperse itself into entropy, and everything will become disparate particles, and there won't be really any objects. You'll just be alone. You won't even be alone, because what even are you at that point? You're just like a deformed consciousness alone. So this is so goofy, man. I'm making this video to point out that people who pose this don't grasp the cosmological horror of this prompt. Would you rather die tomorrow or live forever? They only think, they project at the max a few million years into the future and think about all that they could do. They don't think about the actual forever. Time out of mind. Nah, death is a necessity, with the world being as it is. I was going to say, the only counter argument I can possibly conceive of that's vaguely, a Christian counter argument to this, and that isn't just sort of atheistic hedonism. Well, to have a consciousness forever would be better than to be a nothingness forever. That's an atheistic viewpoint. The only sort of Christian counter argument I can see to bring up here is, well, for the time that you are, usable, you could be extremely useful to the world. Like, not just the accumulated wisdom you would get over centuries of life experience, that you could be doling out, the books you could write, even if you were an insanely lazy human. You would accumulate knowledge like no one's business. You would become unfathomably wise. Eventually, by sheer accident, you would learn another language because you're just around. I mean, if you think about the sort of things you learn without even putting your hand to educate yourself, the stuff you just pick up through the entertainment you consume, the kind of skills you develop just by trying to enjoy yourself, even at your laziest periods of time, you can still progress. So for a comparatively brief time in your life, you would be a very, very useful subject to have on the earth. Also, people could, give you products that intentionally produce a cancer inside you. And since the cancer won't kill you, it's a little more ethical than doing it to somebody else. That way you can be this permanent cancer patient. This is horrible. You can be this permanent cancer patient until they actually discover a cure for cancer. And they can always be testing new stuff out on you because it's not going to kill you. But what's it going to do? Kill you? No. Because that's literally what I just said. It's not going to kill you. So you could be this unbelievable guinea pig asset to humanity. But that's, if you don't realize how horrible that would be, the government just using you as their crash test dummy for anything, you need to think this through a bit more. And of course, after all that, after all the good you do to the world, after your name being immortalized over and over and over for all the different things you could do, immortalize, you would outlive your name still, because eventually Earth's going to be destroyed, and no matter how long the human race goes on, eventually they can't live past the death of the universe. So eventually they'll all be dead, and it will just be you. Once again, all roads lead not to Rome, but to deformed consciousness in nothingness, in blackness. And it's not just for a time. That becomes everything. It proportionally dwarfs any sort of other millions or billions or trillions of years you could have spent doing anything else. Eventually those trillions will fade in comparison to the decillions, the Googles of years, the Googleplexes of years, the Googleplexes to the Googleplexeth year. Yeah, so you guys really don't grasp the cosmological horror of this idea. Yeah, so even with that counter argument, and considering, so not for myself would I choose to be immortal, but for humanity would I choose to be immortal. Well, no, humans are, you probably shouldn't, because humans are made to die. So whatever good you could do, humanity, either they're gonna accomplish that eventually, or they won't accomplish that eventually, and so it wasn't meant to be in the first place. Because I'm a Calvinist. Yeah, predestination, baby. Yeah. All hail John Calvin. All hail John Calvin. If he was still alive, I would try and seduce. I would try and what was I gonna say? Supplicate him, not seduce him. Supplicate him to, sign an autograph. We're getting off track here. So what I'm saying is, yeah, humans in a sinful world were made to die. God's intention for you is that you die, so it's not worth all the good you could bring the world. So yeah, this is a fun little prompt that I made very unfun. If you stuck to the end here, you're gonna be very existential for a little while, I bet, inside your head. And so, yeah, I guess I'll just close this out by reiterating the prompt. Would you rather die tomorrow or live forever? Well, personally, for me, I don't want to frickin' die tomorrow. Yeah, bring on the immortality. Yeah! 'Twas not for the parting that my sister made. No, it's not for the grief of me mother, but oh, for the loss of me bonny Irish lass, that my heart is breaking forever. Red is the rose that in yonder garden grows, fair is the lily of the valley, clear is the water that flows from the Boyne, but my love is fairer than